Grace, Call, Response, and Transformation. This presentation attempts to tell one story about an experience of grace. It's about how some recognized a call, how all those involved did and are responding to a call for transformation, and how the ripple effect to such call and response continues to expand. Every life is a gift, and every life is both resilient and vulnerable. Our lives can spin out of control through poor choices, as well as through misfortune, such as illness, as well as through abuse, violence, drugs, and alcohol. For some, life from the get-go has been nothing but spinning. My name is Mary-Paula Cancienne, and I teach at Georgian Court University in New Jersey, and I'm a Sister of Mercy. As part of an online program that is being developed regarding mercy spirituality, this is an educational presentation and reflection upon how one group of people are walking the path of spirituality. That is, the ongoing adventure of growing into more compassionate, authentic, and responsible human beings. It tells the story of one group of courageous women at a place called Catherine Center in California, a residential program for women just getting out of prison. This material is more of a reflection than a documentary, and I invite you to view it from that perspective. As you do so, you might ask, what makes this program different? What is the stereotype that I have of women in prison, of women in need? As you will hear, this program receives no government funding because its sponsors are committed to attending to the full person, body, mind, and spirit. And while the program is rooted in Catholic Christian values, it is encouraging and supportive of women finding and working their own path. Most of this video will include the story as told by those who received the initial idea of such a center, and by those involved in providing such a service, and then by a few of the women residents themselves. However, the location and names of the residents will remain undisclosed, but we are grateful to these women for sharing a bit of their lives with us as we reflect upon the way the Spirit moves and invites us all toward fuller and more authentic ways of being compassionate and just in the world, both with one another and with ourselves as well. This is an example of the delicate but powerful and deep work that is being done in the area of restorative justice, which hopes to bring about healing and right, just relationships. First, just a little background. Suzanne Tulin and Marguerite Buchanan are Sisters of Mercy. They are women of many talents who have shared their talents in many ways, such as through music, retreat work, transpersonal psychology, spiritual direction, and education. Both have been committed to the prayer of Taizé and to a form of meditation called centering prayer. Sometime around 2000, they were taking Taizé prayer services and meditation practice to a men's group north of San Francisco, that is, in San Quentin Prison. Here the story begins as told by Suzanne, who recalls Marguerite making a suggestion regarding the meditation they were leading with the inmates.
But then Marguerite said, I think we should do 2 sittings of 20 minutes apiece with a walk in between. I said, Marguerite, you're crazy. These guys can't sit still that long. This is not going to work. She said, well, let's try it. Boy, the minute we tried that, it changed the whole thing. Wow. It deepened it so. It was just extraordinary how it deepened it. And we decided we would like to go to a women's prison too. So we began to go to Dublin over in East Bay. At a certain point in the Lectio Divina, we put the cross down and invited them to the cross, and we had some Spanish chants that we would use that we could manage anyway. But that was such a high point for them. We would pick that cross up afterward. It was wet with their tears. It was just so moving. Then we had been talking about how sad it is. We found the men, with the best of intentions, they would be saying what their plans were when they would get out, and they were going to do this and that. They get out, they'd be right back in because they're released to the same county that they were apprehended in. Well, who's there? They're old friends, and they don't have any money. They can't get jobs, so they would find themselves back in prison. And so we were saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had places? I easily get teary. But if we have places where they could have that intermediate step where they could be helped along and be safe and maybe learn new skills or whatever. So we were thinking about that. Well, one morning in our own meditation, how in centering prayer you're not supposed to dwell on any thought or follow it along. Mm-hmm. Well, I had this thought during during meditation, and the thought was, the next time I see Sister Lillian Murphy, who is in charge of Mercy Housing, I'm going to ask her if there's a possibility of some kind of a house, for women anyway.
Exploring the idea with Mercy Housing was a first step in terms of moving with grace and looking for an organization that could and would sponsor a program inclusive of body, mind, and spirit. In the beginning, the Sisters of Mercy in Burlingame made a significant financial contribution as seed money, but knew they could not take on another sponsored work at that time. As the story goes, it was St. Vincent de Paul of San Mateo County who ran with the project, first offering a humble apartment, but ultimately, through a surprising and generous donation, providing a home and program for 20 to 25 women in a very creatively designed facility.
Roger Hagman, who was on the board of the St. Vincent de Paul Society and in charge of properties, and he's an architect himself, he said, Marguerite, I don't know why we were talking to him about this, but we were. Margaret, there's this apartment that just opened up on Grand Avenue above the thrift store. And so it was that again, was a big grace. All these doors have opened up immediately.
I would say you can't give away what you don't have. So the spiritual journey is a realization, or I think an evolving of awareness that the God within wants our attention. And so from the disciplines of centering prayer or the way of the mantra or entering stillness and silence, I think that's an important tool, probably the first tool I would suggest that most folks should have in their toolbox, is that awareness that they need to take time apart on a daily basis to be with the Lord alone. And out of that growing awareness of entering the depths of our divine essence, we can then be called into, I think, a deeper understanding of how much we are in relationship with every creature and beyond that with all of creation. So it's the discipline of wanting to be still, wanting to sit, not anticipating an outcome that can be put on a chart to show that it was productive, but just being aware of who we are and whose we are as children of God. Well, Catherine Macaulay, I think, was such a role model for women. And I think that's been, for me, and as a New Zealand woman growing up with Mercies in New Zealand, they, I think, first and foremost, indicated there were no barriers for women. And what you could do from the gospel's perspective, there were no barriers. And so they freed us as children and girls going to Mercy High School, particularly in New Zealand, Mercy College, that you could basically do whatever you decided to do. When it came to service, their modelling for me was important in terms of how they reached out to minorities within the culture of New Zealand at that point in time, and how they encouraged us to be about serving. So out of those original ways of serving and being educated to serve, I think the Vincentian piece kind of followed in terms of Vincent, and specifically from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul's perspective, Frederick, being challenged to walk his talk. And so while I was trained in the spirituality, I think, of Catherine ministering and in the teaching areas, that piece then flowed into my understanding that I was being called to see God as the Creator, Jesus as the Redeemer, and the Holy Spirit as the Sanctifier, but that I was unique love myself, and that was something that could continue to evolve, and that there was just a natural merging, I think, between the two disciplines and the two charisms.
Lizette Lynn, who was the first manager, I was the first director, she was the first manager. She had a deep meditation practice. And she was actually the one who thought how important and essential it would be for our women to meditate every day. And of course, as soon as she said it, I could see the truth of it, but she came up with that.
The women who come to Catherine Center, the pattern is that the victimization starts at a very young age, and the pain is suppressed, and drugs and alcohol enter the picture at a very young age typically, and that the usage is to suppress that pain. The pain is awful. So the drugs and alcohol suppress the pain, and then you have impulsive behavior from the drugs and the alcohol, and then you're led into the criminal justice system. So when we're interviewing women who are incarcerated, we have to look at whether or not they're really willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work and uproot that trauma and heal from the pain of that, the neglect, the abandonment, sexual exploitation. It's really typically a horrendous profile. Women have endured, great pain in coming, in going through their life, and so in finding themselves incarcerated, sometimes it's a relief from the pain. That they have a moment to rest, and this program is not for everyone, because again, it takes great courage. So the women of Catherine Center are truly the most courageous women I've ever met in my life.
According to the center program, the women rise around 5:30. They have morning yoga, breakfast, morning meditation and reflection from about 8 to 8:45. They shuttle off to various programs. They have group therapy, personal psychotherapy, somatic kinds of therapies, spiritual direction, drug and alcohol programs, communal dinner that they prepare, and they also have an evening program, and they have evening meditation and lights out at 10.
Truly television, there's not a place for television and cell phones and the potential of returning to old life. It's not helpful. When they if they're interested, and thus far every woman who's gone through the primary program is interested and has applied to the postgraduate program, which is the second year program, then they may have a television in their apartments. They may have cell phones at that point, but the first year is definitely a year that is the external stimulation is controlled to the best of our ability. When you really look at the fact that the majority of the women who come to Catherine Center are society's throwaways, we need to really shift the focus and take a look at our communities, and take a look at the family systems, and take a look at at the truth, and I think that's difficult.
We're trying to offer a place for people to get their lives back, to heal from wounds that prevent them from living a full life. And that means mind, body, and spirits, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's huge. I mean, there's just, there's a whole shift that has to take place in our women's thinking, their whole view of themselves, their whole view of what people are like out there. It's just a transformative experience, as Susie talks about, for everybody.
The ambassadors are, I think the term is good,
Mm-hmm.
because we meet every other month. We go over the budget. We look at the grants that are active, and we figure out for the year what are going to be the events that would be fundraising events. And I've noticed as we've, over the past 10, 11 years, that we have a whole new group of ambassadors. There are not as many that are graduates of both Mercy High Schools, but somehow or another, Sister Marguerite invited people. I kind of always had to laugh because she would meet somebody and she'd say, "I think you'd like to be an ambassador," and this is probably before they knew what Catherine Center was.
I mean, I come from generations of addicts. My life story, if I were to tell my life story, you wouldn't even believe that I was alive or how I lived. It is like, how did it live, and was it really that bad? And it was, and it was, and my addiction was bad. My addiction was really bad, and it wasn't easy. It's not easy,
I had a warrant in another county, so I had to go take care of that. And while I was taking care of my warrant, I realized that my warrant was a blessing in disguise, because staying in the city would have been detrimental to my sobriety.
Like, I was interviewed, and then I was getting released that next week, so there was kind of some idle time in between where I didn't know what was happening. So when I was released from jail, I was standing outside and I was like, I don't know if I'm even going to this place right now, and all these things were going through my mind, and I was thinking about going back to Pacifica, where I'm from, and starting that cycle all over again. Everything was just going through my mind so quick, and I was like, I'm just gonna do that. I can't even do this anymore. I can't even picture myself clean. I can't even, it was just the first thing that popped in my head. And then all of a sudden, Susie, I swear, the heavens opened up, and she walks over to me with the sun shining on her hair, and I was like, she's like, "Do you still want to go?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was about to jump in this van and go to this bar, and what? It was crazy. I felt like that was the basis of my whole entire life for the future. I just made this huge decision to change my life. And my addiction was reeling me in every minute I was outside. I swear it was the biggest epiphany in my whole life. And I'm so glad I came. I felt comfortable immediately. Just being here, I felt like I was doing the right thing. And
How long have you been here?
A little bit over 2 months. So all that just within 2 months, your whole mind just reframes. It's crazy.
I think it would be a lot more difficult to stay sober and to stay sane without spirituality. And you just get to learn about yourself, and you get to love yourself, and you see the person that you truly were meant to be, that was kind of robbed from you as a child, and you get to put all your pieces back together and be the whole person that you once wanted to be, and sometimes days, sometimes months, sometimes years, but you can see it evolve when you are putting your trust and faith into something bigger than yourself.
you know, like I'm on my own, you know, and Catherine Center is the only home that I've known, like since I was like 11. You know, it's the longest I've ever lived anywhere since I was like 12 years old. And I feel safe there. And I'm realizing that it takes that feeling of safety for me to grow. You know, for me to expand and like, you know, pursue other things like my education, you know, or even like progressing in my recovery. You know, if I didn't have that safety, that feeling of safety, I would be concerned about surviving and doing what I needed to do to survive, you know. So, and I'm really grateful, and I have a lot of loyalty for Catherine Center. You know, it's an amazing place, and I'm still like, I'm just amazed that someone could love other people and love them unconditionally and offer a safe place for me to be and just want the best for me and just want me to heal and progress and like mature and become a solid woman who can like take good care of myself.
As you probably noticed, the ground was well tilled for the listening for the nudgings of the spirit when Suzanne first felt a restless desire to respond to the needs of women getting out of prison, women who often have no supports and a long history of victimization, going back to childhood. The realization and information regarding a high percentage of men and women returning to prison drew compassion and a desire to act. But how? The first step was to be informed and to talk with others, and to widen the circle, and to continue to listen to that still small voice of grace.